You don't know what hell awaits you. Yeah, I do. Vengeance takes flight once again in The Crow 2024, a modern reimagining of the 1994 original, starring Brandon Lee, and a film that achieved cult status since then, unfortunately due in large part to the untimely passing of Brandon Lee during the shooting of that particular movie. But it was successful enough that it was able to spawn a sequel, The Crow City of Angels. It wasn't all that great, but my God, that seemed like Citizen Kane compared to The Crow 3 and The Crow 4. They're down a fucking chasm so goddamn deep you have to get binoculars out and look down and say, wow, these are terrible. David Boreanaz was in one of those? Also, there was a Crow television series that wasn't all that bad from what I remember, but it didn't last all that long. What's your favorite Crow movie? And if it's not the first one, please explain yourself. And then check yourself before you wreck yourself. And maybe don't drink and drive. And maybe switch up your medications. Because I can't imagine that anybody would actually think the sequels were any better than the original. That being said, we all like different things. Speaking of things, here's The Crow 2024. I can just imagine the pitch for, this to be done. Studio heads are probably like, okay, Brandon Lee's not getting any younger on account of him having been dead since the shooting of the first movie was going on. So, okay, we can't get any of the other leads to come back. So who do the kids like? And then one person raises their hand and says, Bill Skarsgård. Oh, Pennywise, he was great. He was also in Barbarian. Barbarian was great. It turned me on. Georgina Campbell, who's incredibly beautiful. Not in this movie, but just wanted to shout her. And he was also in Boy Kills World, which was a lot of fun and deserved to do a whole lot better at the box office. I really enjoyed it. I hope it gets a new life on streaming. Bill Skarsgård is a tremendous fucking actor. And him playing Eric Draven wasn't an immediate red flag. It's like, okay, he's at least somebody you could see working. He got himself in great shape for Boy Kills World. So, okay, a modern reimagining of The Crow, fine. We can't get the original director, so we get Rupert Sanders, who did Snow White and Mike Huntsman, and also the live-action Ghost in the Shell. Okay, I'm down, I guess. Well, Snow White and Mike Huntsman wasn't all that bad, but it was written by Zach Baylin, who did King Richard, Creed 3, and Gran Turismo. My enthusiasm for this is starting to slip just a little bit, but Bill Skarsgård can't do it alone because it would be weird to just have a guy seeking vengeance if he was in a world of just absolutely, no other people, just wandering around like a lost soul, confused, wondering why they decided to remake The Crow this badly. Oh, tip my goddamn hand. So basically, the idea of the original story, you had Eric Draven, you had his girlfriend Shelley, or his fiance. They were about to be married. They got killed by a violent gang. No Ernie Hudson, no Tony Todd, no 90s synthetic, no 90s pop or rock, and no 90s grunge, no ridiculous nature, no massive amount of rain, soaking these streets all the time. I mean, there's rain in this, but my point is there's no dreariness. There's no at least atmosphere. I didn't love the first Crow. I still maintain the same thing I said in my previous review. Check out my retro review of that. Had Brandon Lee not passed away, that film would not be seen nearly as, or been received nearly as well as it is now. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad movie, but let's be perfectly honest. Let's call a spade a Crow. But nevertheless, because of that, and because it actually does reek of the 90s, reimagining something isn't the worst thing in the world. The thing is, the marketing campaign for this basically indicated that it was like a studio executive's idea of what the cool kids think are cool. Fascinating. Bill Skarsgård with a goofy haircut. I mean, I'm sorry, but the long hair worked a whole lot better. Him having the short hair just didn't work at all. And the thing is when the second biggest actor you have is Danny Huston, who is very good. He was in Consecration, which was not all that great, but he's been in a lot of good stuff. He's a tremendous actor. But when you give him nothing to do, and you basically have a movie that is not that much longer than the original, but somehow feels about 40 to 45 minutes longer because of the stretched out story. Because in the first one, we had Eric and Shelley. Their deaths were being investigated. Eric was resurrected within the first little bit of the movie. This, it takes a while before we get to anything. We do get a little more backstory with Eric and Shelley, which would be fine if this version of Eric and Shelley were interesting at all. They aren't. Also, I haven't shouted who Shelley is. She's played by, let me check my notes, FKA Twigs. Okay, what kind of fucking name is that? Who the fuck names their kids that? Who thinks that's a good name to come up with? FKA Twigs. Was, collection of sticks not, or not in the wheelhouse. What the fuck? Was like, oh, we're going to be the branch manager. Oh, we're just going to be a twig. We're just going to be a little twig flapping around. We're FKA Twigs. What in the world? Why? Why? Why would you? Why? Somebody had to tell me she was a singer. I listened to a couple of her songs before this movie, before I watched this, and boy, if that's her singing ability, I guess she could try acting. And then after watching this, I'm like, she should not to find something else to goddamn do. She is an abomination. She is terrible. She is fucking rotten in this. And I'm sure she's nice, but god damn it. And also, I'm sorry, but I just have to point this out. And yes, who am I to talk about anyone's hair? But I saw the Crow premiere and stuff like that. And it's like her hair was escaping. It's like it was trying to fly off elsewhere. Ironic for a movie about a crow. She has no charisma, no personality, and whatever. If you want to see her dance around in her underwear, this is the movie for you, you weirdos. You get to see a little more setup. You get to see that. And then once everybody dies, as Lance Archer once said, if you're not a wrestling fan, you don't get it, then Eric must seek vengeance. The villain is played by Danny Huston. And I'm sorry, this has got to be the stupidest fucking villain that I have seen in a while, as far as the character, not the actor. But somehow the 94 version feels more modern than this. This feels like something straight out of the goddamn 90s, and not even the good part of the 90s. This really just reeks of just pure 90s bullshit. Like, oh, we're going to capture the... It's almost like they just decided to transplant... like do a bad version of the original Crow a year or two later. Except for smartphones, the special effects aren't all that great. The whole idea of showing the underworld, the bridge between the two worlds and everything was, I guess, somewhat creative, at least in theory. And Bill Skarsgård is sleepwalking through this goddamn thing. I mean, again, he is a good actor. I do want to shout out Laura Byrne, who is gorgeous. Good grief, she's a Finnish actress, apparently. She looks like she's about 6'2", but she's freaking beautiful. There are more people in this, but the thing is even despite the fact that, you had Michael Wincott, and you had Ba Ling, you had Tony Todd, Ernie Hudson, you had various other people in the original Crow. Even though their characters were a little bit annoying and the gang was just being picked off and everything, they still had personality. I don't know how close it was to the graphic novel. I don't give a shit. I don't care how close this is to the graphic novel. If this is close enough to it, then I'm glad they went with the 94 version. Because this was terrible. This is fucking terrible. This was bad from the beginning. You don't even get to really see... You don't get enough of a backstory that you want to see, this guy get vengeance. There's one scene that I'll talk about in the spoilers that would be really, really cool if you didn't have to just slog through a whole bunch of just melodrama and nothing happening, with the exception of like one little bit of an action scene. You don't really see anything for the first hour. And Vincent is a terrible villain. I mean, he does a couple things and everything, and has the power of suggestion and has this backstory that's like very, very paper thin. And I don't understand how in the world they thought this was a good story. Maybe I should have expected it from the guy that wrote this Gran fucking Turismo, which was terrible. A terrible movie. Archie, by the way, deserves so much better than that. So, yeah, basically the idea that this is what they went with. What were the cut scenes? And I'm not talking like video game cut scenes. What were the scenes they cut? Because there were dragged out portions and everything, and you don't get any sense of emotional attachment to Eric and Shelley. You really felt that Eric was pained in the first one, and even City of Angels wasn't all that great. You at least felt a little bit of sympathy for the guy. And then the last two were just terrible. Now it's like Eric is just this... You can try and reimagine to make him like, like where he's seeking vengeance, and then he gets wrapped up in all this stuff. and then he really has to get dark. And okay, you can do that if you have enough character to go around, and they don't. There are characters in this movie that just bop in and out. Characters whose names I totally goddamn forgot. There's one friend of Eric's. There's one friend of Shelley's. There's this thing about, like, this video floating around and everything that could ruin Vincent's goddamn life. Despite the fact I'm going to talk about in the spoilers how stupid that is. It's just a very, very terrible movie with some horrendous CGI. I mean, absolutely horrendous. There's a little bit of violence during one particular scene, I guess, that would be all right. Except it's like one halfway decent scene, because I've seen stuff like that done better in other movies. Boy Kills World in particular, that it just feels out of place. It's like, okay, we put effort in there, so we're not going to put effort in anything else. It's in theaters if you want to check it out, or wait for streaming, or just let it fly away into the abyss. Spoilers. So, basically, Vincent made a deal to have eternal life, but he has to send innocent souls to the goddamn to hell. He does this by in their ears, and then they kill people or do bad things, and then they die. FKA Twigs, that's a stupid name. That is a really, really stupid name, I just want to say. Nevertheless, Miss Twigs, who is the size of a twig, I do want to say. I'm sorry. I just, if you're gonna try to put people in roles and they aren't qualified for them, then it has to be ripped apart. She basically was part of this whole thing that Vincent had, and Vincent was controlling some of these women, like a few others get killed. One gets killed after leaking the video. And the video, it turns out, we find out a little bit later, was of Miss Twiggs stabbing one person because Vincent to her. And that video is seen a lot later by Eric. But for a while, Miss Twiggs is in this mental institution, or this institution, and is basically there and safe to an extent because after the video, was sent to her, now she's being targeted because Vincent is after her. And Bill Skarsgård's Eric is there because we see in an early scene where there's a horse that was killed by some razor wire or something. And man, Atreyu's horse gets around. You're welcome for that memory. That was less painful than watching this, by the way. I will watch that scene on repeat for 30 minutes, which is a lot, as opposed to watching this movie ever again. As opposed to watching 10 minutes of this movie. Now, they strike up a romance. He ends up helping Shelley escape. He escapes with her. They have a whirlwind romance. She talks about, if you knew stuff about me, you wouldn't want to be with me. Don't worry about that, particular video, of course, and it turns out to be what I just said. They end up getting killed, getting back to their apartment that is like Shelley's friend's, loft apartment thing. But people end up killing it. It's filmed in the Czech Republic, I guess, so I assume that's where they're supposed to be. I don't care. So yeah, they're killed. Eric is sent to this afterworld part, this train station with this one guy that turns out actually is a paramedic in the real world. And all this time, by the way, Eric and Shelley are trying to be revived. So all this stuff taking place within seconds. It just seems to take an eternity. This movie takes an eternity to not only get going, but to fucking end. So Eric basically is given the power of the crow, and as long as his love carries him, he will be fine. But then he sees the video, and his love starts to have doubt. So he's sent back to the goddamn underworld. He had a chance to do this, and that's it. He had one scene where he killed a cop, because he found out he couldn't die. And then literally we have Vincent doing the thing, and then and then not really much else happens. And then Eric, it's revealed that Eric actually can't die. So then he is shot, though, and killed because his love is in doubt. Whatever. And Vincent was upset because, oh man, he had the key to eternal life. which you technically already have. You just have to keep sending the souls of the innocent there, and you've been around for centuries. So why would you need... Whatever, it's fine. It's fine. Eric basically talks to this paramedic guy with the snow white, or with the white beard and everything, or the gray beard. And he says, take a blood oath. My soul for hers, you say. So we'll save her. You get this black blood and everything. And then he starts to put on the weird, crow makeup thing with the eye makeup. And then the thing like this. Want to know how I got these scars? This movie left scars. Scars that will never heal because it was terrible. He ends up going on a murderous rampage. Killing people. The one part that was finally halfway decent was the opera house scene, where he's just slashing and killing and all that stuff. But the thing is, it's so out of place with all the melodrama and bullshit, it's not earned. It's just like, oh, that's what you could have been doing. I mean, granted, it might have been a little bit like Boy Kills World, but at least it would have been trying. But he slashes people, he puts a sword through a guy's mouth, he does all this stuff, which, okay, cool, whatever. He ends up... then, going out on stage with the people that were doing the ballet, whatever, and has the heads of a couple people and throws them into the crowd. Again, that's fun. We could have had more fun like that, but it just, by that point, I was totally checked out of the movie. And then Danny Huston basically ends up getting him and kind of getting his blood, bit by shooting him, getting his blood and everything and all that stuff, and oh, he's being possessed. He's getting the eternal power. But then he drags Vincent to the underworld, where Vincent didn't want to be. And Shelley's soul's in hell, by the way. That's implied. And he ends up basically saying, you have no idea what hell awaits you. Yeah, I do. And drowns him and everything. And then he pulls Shelley back up. And Shelley says, I can't live without you. Well, I can't go back with you. And Shelley's resurrected, and then he says he fought to save you. The paramedic guy, there was a train station guy, whatever. Jesus fucking Christ, God damn it. Oh, so bad. So bad, I hate it. I hate it. And then Eric Draven gives a little monologue thing at the end. Do not try to do a sequel. I hope this movie bombs. I really hope this movie bombs, because this was really, really bad. The critics were not harsh enough on it. Yeah, it gets an F. It gets an F. It is one of the worst movies of the year. It's right up there with goddamn... Might be worse than Borderlands. Because there was potential here. There really was a potential with Borderlands. Nevertheless, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Rickland. I'll see you soon.